Hey, whatever, it might not be Thursday, but it is that time. I decided to do a sports Q&A. Hooray! I do plan on recording one maybe late Saturday night and having it up early Sunday morning. So if some of you guys out there in particular have fantasy football questions for the week or lineup questions, trade questions, waiver wire, free agent questions, any of that stuff, feel free to go to Twitter, pfspot_Schlegel, and tweet those questions to me. Thanks to those of you that tweeted your questions for this Q&A, though. Let me get started with this one. Saving Ryan's Privates asks, I was thinking of benching Breeze for Joe Flacco when the Saints play the Panthers. Your thoughts? This is why I think I explained it to you a little bit on Twitter, but I don't like carrying two quarterbacks, especially in this case. Why would you carry Flacco knowing damn good and well that you drafted Drew Brees really high? I mean, Drew Brees is a top three, at worst, fantasy football quarterback. Why would you ever entertain the thought of playing matchups with any other quarterback on your bench? It just doesn't make any sense, and it's such a waste of a roster spot. You could talk about bye weeks, you could talk about injuries. Frankly, Flacco would probably still be there when it came time for that bye week, or if you needed it because Breeze did get injured. So, no, I think it's one of those things, especially when you get a marquee guy like a Breeze. When in doubt, play him. That's the best way I can put it. When in doubt, play him. You drafted them high for a reason. Their pedigree suggests that they deserve to be played whenever possible. Barry Messina asks, which wide receiver do I leave out this week of Vincent Jackson, Michael Floyd, Jeremy Maclin, or T.Y. Hilton? I'm assuming that's three wide receivers. Maybe you have something else on your flex position. So if I'm assuming that you're going to play three wide receivers, I would play T.Y. Hilton against the Eagles, definitely. Trying to think. Uh, Out of all of these, I'd lean towards maybe maybe benching Vincent Jackson, but that's hard to say. Either Jackson or Floyd, just off the top of my head, because Macklin's going against the Colts secondary. Um, I might go with Jackson. I might. You might want to ask me that question again on Twitter Sunday morning, honestly. Kurt X Cocaine, rank these young point guards. John Wall, Eric Bledsoe, Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, and Kemba Walker. I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll go Walker 5, Bledsoe 4, Wall 3, Irving 2, and Lillard 1. Out of those five, I think Lillard is the best point guard, but that's just me. Madden God 45. Which team is more likely to pull off an upset this week? The Browns, the Jags, or your Bears? Oh, God. Out of the three, I think it's easily the Jaguars, even though I don't know if beating Washington would be that much of an upset. No way, shape, or form is it Chicago Bears. You're talking about two offensive linemen, or two of your starting offensive linemen being out for the game already officially. Maybe one or both of your top wide receivers either being out or being severely hampered. A defense that sucks, Cutler being Cutler. Where would anybody think in their right minds, honestly, that the Bears would have any chance against San Francisco, especially on the road, since they just lost at home to the Bills? I probably would go with the Jags, being the most likely of the three. Omer H82, after seeing week one, who would you put money on getting the next number one overall draft pick? Two teams in the AFC West are going to be contending, it looks like, in Oakland and Kansas City. It seems like every day another injury for Kansas City, and the Raiders are just bad. If I had to guess right now, that would be a team that would be in serious contention. I think the Cowboys would find a way to win just enough games to maybe be at the back end of the top five or early, somewhere like 6 to 8. Maybe the Giants are a possibility if the Rams implode, because of the quarterback situation and other stuff. Maybe it would be them. I think the Jags, the Browns won't be in that consideration. If I had to go right now, I would have to say the Raiders would be the choice for me. Jay Gore 492. What are your thoughts on Floyd Mayweather's comments about Ray Rice? Of course he would say that shit. One abuser protecting another. Fuck do we even listen to Floyd Money Mayweather to begin with? Why do people buy his fights to begin with? Why do people care about him to begin with? all this outrage and all this uproar about Ray Rice and what happened, but people like Floyd Money Mayweather are able to coach free with their history of domestic violence and so on and so forth. So, an idiot said idiotic things. Imagine that. SA Wrestling Blog. I need your advice. Should I trade Frank Gore for Emmanuel Sanders or keep Gore? When you guys ask me these questions, it's hard sometimes because I don't know how your lineup looks. I don't know if Frank Gore is your best running back or if he's your fifth or sixth best running back. You know what I mean? I don't know if Emmanuel Sanders is a flex player for you or if he's your number one or number two wide receiver on your team. It's really hard for me to know. And because of that, it's hard for me to tell you one way or another. I would say for the time being, keep Frank Gore because Emmanuel Sanders really didn't see much action in the second half of that Broncos-Colts game. Furthermore, very soon Welker is going to be coming back, so you don't know what Sanders' role is going to be yet. Frank Gore, at least for the time being, is going to be the lead running back for the 49ers. Now, is he going to have some carries and potentially some goal line touches siphoned away by Carlos Hyde? Yes. I'd expect Hyde's workload to increase a little bit as the year goes along. But Frank Gore is still Frank Gore, so I would keep him at this point in time. Chris S. Krager. If the Bears took Tim Couch instead of Cade McNown in the 99 draft, could it have worked as a quarterback stopgap for a few years? No, because first of all, the Browns were picking number 1 that year. The Bears were originally picking, number 7. So there's no way it would have worked because the Bears wouldn't have been in position to draft Tim Couch. Excuse me. Tim Couch was a system quarterback, and Cade McNown was just not an NFL quarterback. So it would have been equally just as big of a disaster, even if Couch would have stayed fully healthy. So no, it wouldn't have made a difference, and it wouldn't have helped. It wouldn't have worked. Way back in '99, my guy out of that draft was Javon Curse, and then number 2 or 3 was Champ Bailey. So I still wish to this day they would have went in one of those directions. MALDMY, yes, please. Should I trade Antonio Brown to get Jimmy Graham? Side note, I have Megatron, Demaryius Thomas, Cordero Patterson, and Percy Harvin. So you have a pretty loaded wide receiving core, is what you're trying to tell me. Now, I'm assuming that either you're weak at tight end or you're really weak at running back because Megatron would have probably been your first-round pick, Thomas your second-round pick. You probably got Antonio Brown maybe in the 4th round with Patterson and Harvin the next 2 rounds, or you went wide receiver crazy the first 5 rounds. Now, if you're talking about Antonio Brown to get Jimmy Graham straight up, yes, but good luck finding any fucking buddy that's going to make that trade. If you're saying that as part of a package, I need to know the whole package for both parties involved. Is this a trade that's been proposed to you? Is this a trade that you want to propose in a fantasy land? In theory, yes. Would I trade Antonio Brown for Jimmy Graham straight up? If I had Antonio Brown and I wanted Jimmy Graham, yes. But could you find a dance partner to do that? Probably not. Because you figure in most leagues, Jimmy Graham was a first-round pick, and I highly doubt anybody's going to want to give up on Jimmy Graham. Just saying. Ferminator asked, your thoughts on why David Carr became such a huge bust in the NFL, and how do you feel his brother will play for Oakland? As far as David Carr becoming a bust, I was never a huge fan of his coming out of Fresno State, 1. Number 2, I thought his release was incredibly slow, which was going to cause huge problems. 3, I always questioned his ability to buy time with his feet. He didn't have to be a great athlete, but I never thought he really had the ability to move around in the pocket, which I think is incredibly important and necessary for even the most immobile and stiff of NFL pocket passers. Number 4, after drafting Andre Johnson with the 3rd overall pick in 2003, if you remember the Texans at that time, their offensive line was god-awful. So, of course, every year in the draft, because Charlie Casserly ended up becoming a tool by the end of his run as GM, went incredibly heavy on the defensive line. Who all did they fucking draft? Was it Travis Johnson and Jason Babin and then Mario Williams, obviously in 06? They didn't bring much other help around him in terms of skill position players via the draft. Number 2 wide receiver, tight end, running backs high. They sure as hell didn't help him on the offensive line. So there's a lot of factors as to why David Carr was such a huge bust in the NFL. And how do I feel about his brother playing for Oakland? Frankly, Oakland had no business. They're going to be bad anyway. So why not find out what you got in Derek Carr to begin with? Carr is this situation in Oakland might be somewhat reminiscent to me of what happened with the Panthers in 2010. The Panthers took Clausen in the second round. They sucked all year, ended up with the number one overall pick, and then they got their franchise quarterback the next year in Cam Newton. I think that could potentially happen to a Derek Carr. Unfortunate, but shit, that's the way it goes. And if they finish that bad where the Raiders had the number one overall pick and Derek Carr started every single game of the season, then he's already answered that he's not your guy and he's not going to be the long-term franchise quarterback for you anyways. So, but I think it's good that they've given him the shot. You know, it wasn't great that opening week against the Jets, but he wasn't terrible either. Edsel4 closes out this Q&A by asking, do you think the Niners are in must-win-now mode for the Super Bowl this year? Oh, yes, I've talked about this. I think this is the year to either shit or get off the pot. You know, 3 straight NFC Championship games, a Super Bowl appearance and loss mixed in there. You only have a certain amount of shelf life usually to be that type of contender, and based off of the way that team is currently constructed, especially considering Harbaugh might not be there after this season, I think the Niners are definitely in a win-now mode when it comes to the Super Bowl. I don't think there's any question about that. That doesn't mean, let me clarify, that doesn't mean that I don't think that even if Harbaugh left, the 49ers still couldn't be competitive for several years and maybe at some point in time win a Super Bowl. But I think in the way that they're currently constructed and the way things are currently set up, this is the shit or get off the pot year for the San Francisco 49ers. I think beyond question, it has to be. So thanks again to you guys that submitted your questions. Like I said, go to Twitter, pfspot_Schlegel, and tweet me your questions. Hopefully you get enough in by maybe Saturday night where I can record a Q&A Saturday night, upload it early Sunday morning, especially with all of your fantasy questions. Most of this Q&A seem to be fantasy questions, so I'm assuming a lot of you have a lot more out there, and hopefully I can give you some decent fantasy football advice, better than I did for week number 1. But week number 1 is kind of a crapshoot. You don't really know what to get anyways. All right, thank you guys.